may be seated. When I was a child, I carried around this tattered little thing that I called my pucksace because I could not pronounce pillowcase all of the way quite yet. I later found out that there were actually two of them, probably came in a pair with a set of bedding. My parents would wash one of them while I carried the other one around and got it all dirty, and then they would swap them. And maybe you had a blankie or a stuffed animal or whatever you carried around, but it was a source of comfort, right? It was something that was regular and familiar, but also part of routines. Like I guarantee you, I don't remember what the routine was, but they probably made me brush my teeth, probably read me a bedtime story, and then put me to bed, where I grabbed onto that pucksace and probably wouldn't have gone to bed easily without having that there with me. Routines are helpful for us as people because they keep us from having to think through all of the details of every day. I used to work in an office building where they had a magnetic card reader that opened the doors, and so we all had these little retractable things with our magnetic badge, and when I got home at the end of every day, I would take all of that off and put it in the same place. That was my habit. Well, every once in a while, I'd get distracted on the way into the house and set it someplace else, or something would get set on top of it. I'd get up, go to work the next day, get to the door, nothing, right? And then I'd have to stand around and wait for somebody to let me in the building and all of that. That's where those routines and habits are helpful. Well, routines and habits are sort of day-to-day sorts of things, but we also have what I would say are bigger routines that we call rituals. And rituals work a lot the same, but also a little bit different. I think of maybe some of you have had season tickets to like Florida State or Florida or South Florida, Central Florida football games. And there's a whole ritual that goes with that. People gather around tailgates with certain kinds of food and drink and with certain people. And they do that, every time there's a home game. But then, you got to wait until the next season comes around. So in that way, a ritual like that helps us to keep time. It tells us when a season has come around, and then week to week, it helps us keep time. In between those seasons, things happen. New players, coach changes, whatever that might be. But then as you gather around that tailgate, life has happened for all of those people, right? And so that regular gathering around that is a ritual that helps keep time. It also helps keep company, because it's a group of community of people that gather around that tailgate. And it's the same people. And probably over time, there's guests that come along, and some people move away, and the community shifts and changes, but there's still a keeping of company that happens in that ritual. It also is a way of keeping story. So as you gather around the tailgate, it may be that some of those people you're keeping company and time with, you went to college with there, and say, hey, you remember that time when, and you remember that story from way back when. Or maybe it's just, you remember last week at the game when this happened, right? And it's a way of sharing that story and keeping that story, but also the shared stories that you have and just other things aside from that game in the community that happens in that place. So we have these rituals, and part of what they do is help us keep time and company and story. We also have faith rituals that do the same thing. They come at different intervals, like baptism is one of our rituals. An actual baptism doesn't happen every single time we gather, but we do remember our baptisms regularly, and there's a ritual to that, right? When we baptize a child, we light candles, we say certain words and certain prayers. It helps us to keep time in that family and that child's life, helps us to keep company around that font together, helps us to keep the story of this baptism of Jesus in particular, but as part of the bigger promises of God. All of that happens in that ritual. As we go along, we have confirmation. We have sometimes first Bible classes, like a ritual that goes with that. We have marriages, and then not all rituals are happy, so we also have rituals around death. And in those times, again, we come together and we say familiar words and prayers, and we have things like eulogies that help us keep story as we keep company and keep time together. Christmas is a cultural ritual on the one hand, but it also is one of our faith rituals. And it helps us to keep time and keep company and keep story. I was sitting on my couch this week, and I looked at my Christmas tree. Some of you may have different kinds of Christmas trees, but ours is a whole wide variety of ornaments that go from the homemade when I was a kid in Sunday school class to the store-bought gift from someone else in all variety. But when I looked at those ornaments, it struck me that they are all part of a ritual that help us to keep time and company and story. One of the ornaments that's hanging on our tree this year is two little snow people that are facing each other, and it says, like, couple's first Christmas or something, 1997. So I look at that and go, oh, somebody must have gave us that the year we got married, and that then now is on our tree, and it helps us to keep time. And in that year, it was helping us keep time that was our first Christmas together as a married couple. I know we've got a couple of other ones that are like a little picture. It says baby's first Christmas, and you put the little baby's picture in there. Also a way that we keep time, because that happened between two Christmases. And then the tree helps to keep that time that we have as a family. There's another one on our tree that's an angel playing a trumpet, kind of flying and playing a trumpet at the same time. And on it, it says, The Hovens, 1987. Now, I know it may look like I just finished 8th grade, but actually I was in 8th grade in the Christmas of 1987. And when I look at that one, right, I know that that's a lot of Christmases. That's some time that has passed. But I also look at it and know that that probably wasn't a gift to me or either of my brothers at that age. Probably it was a gift to my parents for our family. And my parents have both been dead for enough years now that keeping time with Christmas, it's not our first one without them, right? It's been quite a few. But that ornament reminds me that there was a time when I was a kid around that tree, and my parents were both with us, and our neighbors came over when we got home from church and kept company with us in that space. Those ornaments remind us that Christmas is a way of keeping time. It's also a way of keeping company. That ornament is an example of one that was gifted to us. There's another one on our tree. It's a wise man. I only know that it's mine because my parents later told me that we had church grandparents when I was a kid. I don't remember any of this. I was too little. But we didn't live by our family, so apparently some kindly elderly people in the congregation adopted us as grandchildren and treated us as if we were theirs. And so I have ornaments that came from them, right? That's company keeping around the rituals of Christmas. And we have other ornaments that were gifts from other people. And there's gifts under the tree, which happen when we keep company with one another, when we gather around that tree. But here's the thing about keeping company at Christmas and keeping time. Just as death is a ritual that isn't always at a happy time, Christmas can be hard. There are people who are keeping company this year, and there's somebody missing for the first time. Right? My parents have been gone for a while, but there's others who that grief is still fresh. I don't know if any of your families have difficult people, but those, right, the holidays can be stressful. You know, there's that one cousin or uncle or sibling or whoever, mom, dad, whoever it is, there's always that tension that comes where keeping company can be hard because people are complicated and hard. And there's people that don't have Christmas trees at all, and people to keep company with at all. And so as our Christmas rituals, right, are traveling around us in our culture in the ways they do, and as we gather in our faith ways that we do, this keeping time and then keeping company sometimes means that people are keeping company alone. And A Christmas Story meets us in that space. The last bit is the keeping story. There's an angel on top of this tree. Our angel on home right now is a noodle, like an actual little noodle with a little tiny head and little angel wings, and barely fits on the top of the tree, but it's still an angel. And it reminds us that in the story we have tonight, that there's an angel that comes to these shepherds and sings good news of great joy. It's a story, the story, that animates us as people of faith. Any stories that we share, as I am tonight about Christmases past, fit within that bigger story. So that we come together at Christmas and we keep time together, we keep company, and we keep story. The thing is, rituals don't always go so smoothly. That little pucksace I had got lost. Later, when I was an adult, I found a box of stuff in my mom's that had the pucksace in it, and I found out it didn't get lost. It got taken away and hidden. Well, it was probably time, right? You can't have a high school kid walking around with a pucksace in the classroom. And so there was a point in time where they said, this has to change. Something new needs to happen in his routines. And so it is sometimes for us, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic where still, this is different from last Christmas where no one was here, but we're still not all the way back to where we were, and we'll probably never go back. It's moving forward in a new way, which is where this Christmas story is really helpful. When you go and read the story from Luke, what it starts with is there was a census. Now, we have them every 10 years, kind of like a big cultural ritual. The story tells us it was the first one. This was not a routine habit. It was a disruption. And then Mary and Joseph had to go travel. You can bet that the innkeeper probably wasn't running a childbirth center in the stable out back. So that was new, not expected, not habit, not ritual, but a new way of entering into this event that was happening at that time. I don't think the shepherds went out into the fields every night and said, well, angels are about here. What are they going to have to say this evening? No, that was a whole new visit, this announcement of good news of great joy. All of the story of Christmas is new things happening amidst routines that were probably disrupted and habits that were about to be changed. Now, we fast forward a couple thousand years, and our Christmas traditions in many ways are very sacred, and please don't mess with them, right? Except for the pandemic has messed with them. And so now we find ourselves in these new places. Still keeping time, even though the way we do it may change. Still keeping company, even though the people around the tree may have changed some, or some of them are challenging, and still keeping this great story. But the thing is, as much as we try to keep time and company and story, we're not always great at it. What the Christmas story tells us is that Jesus came among us, God with us, to keep time with us, that God came to be a human being among us to keep company with us, and to keep the story. We're going to hear from John in a little bit that says, in the beginning was the Word. The Word is story, right? From the beginning it was a story. It's always been a story. The Christmas story, the Easter story, the whole thing we have as people of faith is a story, and God keeps that story with us. There's one other ornament I saw on our tree this year. It's a lighthouse, probably because we have visited quite a few lighthouses, and we picked it up at one of them. When you visit a lighthouse and it's open, you get to see all of the signs. Whenever we visit a museum, my kids say, Dad, please don't read all the signs. But when you read the signs, you learn things, right? Like the lighthouse used to have a keeper, or more than one keeper. They lived there with their family. And then they would have to go all the way up all 100 or 200 or whatever stairs, carrying buckets of oil to keep the lamp lit so that the ships out on the treacherous seas could find their way safely home. When we hear this Christmas story, it isn't just that God keeps time, keeps company, keeps story with us. God is actually the keeper of all of us, all of the whole thing. When we get to hearing John later with the lights all out and the candlelight with us, we will be reminded that Jesus came into the world, and what he brought into the world was life, and the life was the light of all people. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Ultimately, God is the keeper of the light that shines into the darkness. So all of the work that we do in these holiday seasons, all of the busyness, all of the stress to keep time and company and story together, we should keep doing it because rituals are really good for us as people. But we do it trusting that God is the keeper of it all and ultimately the keeper of the light. So whether the seas are smooth or rough as we journey through life, God keeps that light shining, does the heavy work of getting all the oil up the stairs so that we can find our way safely home into that time and company and story that God keeps for us all along the way. Amen.